Happy.
Teresa and Reynaldo, say good morning to LinkedIn.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Welcome to anybody who is dialed in now to LinkedIn, or people who maybe will be joining later and watching the live stream later. I am Cynthia Forstman, and I'm delighted to be here this morning with Teresa Agresta.
Nice to see you again.
Yeah, Teresa's my co-founder at CultureTalk, and we're really delighted today to have a special guest, Reynaldo Naves, who I will introduce in a moment, but you can say hi, Reynaldo.
Hey, everybody.
Awesome. So just a quick overview of what we're doing here on Thursdays with Culture Talk. If you are part of any kind of workplace culture conversation, you know that culture can be really challenging to talk about. It's a conversation that often gets stuck on the surface level. It gets confused with programs and events and perks, but we know that culture is more complex than that. And yet it can feel abstract and difficult to define. So because we're talking about human beings and human interaction and human decision-making, culture really shows up in like what it feels like, the lived experience that employees or even our customers experience around our organizations. So the tool set Culture Talk is really designed to create a common language that lets us talk about culture, to turn it into something really tangible that we can measure, that we can manage, that we can shift and scale. And we go live every other week here, talking to people like Reynaldo who are working on cultural transformations. And so let me move now to introducing Reynaldo. Reynaldo is a partner and director at Olivia Global. He and his team work with clients on all of the challenges involved in transforming cultures, being sustainable, digitization, innovation, things like that. Reynaldo actually joined us as a Culture Talk partner in 2021. He wanted to bring a new perspective to large, complex project he was working on. We were delighted to hear from Reynaldo and also another one of his associates, Guido, and I think you're here, so thank you. And they were specifically looking for a culture assessment. Reynaldo, welcome. Where are you calling in from today?
Yes, I'm calling from Brazil, São Paulo. It's a pleasure to be here with you and to share some lessons and learnings we have since we decided to use Culture Talk in our projects. So my story, if I can tell you, yes, I would please. Like to, if it were as a Netflix series, the journey has 4 seasons and certainly goes beyond Game of Thrones. The first season is about a mechanical and industrial engineering who choose his professional based on his passion for automobiles and discovered that professional fulfillment went far beyond that. So he decided to move forward to a second season as a product development professional, not anymore in industrial market, but in financial services industry. So I worked for ABN AMRO, Visa, and after that, henceforth in the next season, I became a marketeer. So who creates some new brands and new businesses, first in Latin America and globally for Accor Hospitality. I know you know the brands of Accor network. So, but it brought lots of experience, but not bring this fulfillment and so on. So after a season in Paris, this guy decides to endeavor his own consultancy and based on innovation and transformation, which become later Olivia in Brazil with some career friends. So considering if you are curious about my archetypes,
yes, always. Yes.
I'm passionate by family, wine, trips, and nature, but as an archetype, as I'm a madness, I'm a hero, a roller, and a musician. So can we imagine, Cynthia? It's very tough.
She knows because I'm a ruler and a magician too, but no, not the hero.
It is very tough. It's a beautiful combination. I know we're going to be talking about archetype. I would love, Reynaldo, with that background, could you also just share a little bit more about Olivia, kind of where the business is located and the kinds of companies that you work with?
So Olivia is an international consultancy that enables and connects business strategy to people, enabling some behaviors, symbols, and systems that allows and accelerate the transformations in organizations. We create very unique storytelling and descriptive experiences with the purpose of the company. So Olivia manages high complex projects throughout Latin America and in Europe. We have operations in 7 countries in Latin America and a hub in Spain from which we operate throughout Europe. As services, we provide 5 main services or solutions, considering as from cultural transformation to change management, innovation, digital transformation, and sustainability. Remembering that we are linked to behavior. So when we talk about sustainability, mainly we talk about diversity and inclusion. So considering cultural transformation, we have created a journey of design and strategic alignment in which executives define the future vision and the necessary behaviors for that. So unrestrained by the current situation, we create, or they create the future, and they in the behaviors they want to have to sustain this future. That's why we use CultureTalk, because when we create this feature, we make a link and we present the reality and the diagnosis from the platform. And so they can define all the cultural levers that they will accomplish the transformation and the desired goals.
Got it. That's actually a great segue, because Teresa is going to pick up, I think, here and talk to you a little bit more about the specific client you were working with when you reached out to CultureTalk and how that program was designed and how it worked out. So, Teresa.
Yeah, absolutely. It's really exciting to be able to catch you on this journey with your client and understand kind of what was the starting point, what has been happening along the way, and where are you now, and what's the goal? What is the client looking to achieve? And it's been a process and a journey. So maybe you could start by framing it for us, telling us about the background on the client, maybe the size and scale of the project, because it's quite large.
Okay. Just to give you all an overview, it's important we are considering the largest Brazilian, considering the project we are talking about, the largest Brazilian fast fashion retailer in Latin America. So they are operating, imagine they are operating in 3 countries in Latin America, Brazil, Argentina, and Uruguay, but have operations in Asia, considering China and Bangladesh. You have 25,000 people working all around these countries, and they have a very, very successful track record as from the 2000 years. So they are totally results oriented, and they have also care of people and customer delight. So to manage these 3 challenges is very hard to equilibrate and to make the right choices. So As you know, also retailing is undergoing a revolution
Absolutely.
that converges sensitive changes in social habits and technological acceleration. So it impacts works, relationships, purchase models. So to face this context, Renner decided to redesign its strategy, creating an innovative, sustainable ecosystem. They are changing from one brand or a mono-brand process company to a multi-brand company with centralized not only in fashion, but also in lifestyle, creating experiences, much
Wow.
more products and services. And so it's not so easy. So the challenge is precisely transforming a winning company. And nobody wants to change the formula of success. So we had to deepen the cultural diagnosis from one side, reinforcing the cultural attributes that led Renner to success, and on the other side, to precisely incorporate new behaviors that facilitate changes for integration of new businesses, new brands, and technical skills. So always looking forward at desired future, and they have to share this desired future in a vivid manner.
Yes. Yeah. And I love the way you reference the fact that there was a lot that was working. There were really positive, reputation. They were well known. There was a lot that that had led them to success. And still they needed to change because there are so many pressures on from the outside, from what you were referencing. The retail industry is causing those kinds of pressures. And I think that was already happening even before. So this project predates the pandemic, yes? Or did the pandemic just add more pressure?
Yeah, I can tell you that we had to make this project during the pandemic period. That's not the reason, but the culture was already a solid competitive asset. It's very important. They were sustained by a winning culture, or it was the culture that they could keep in the future. That's to change something that was going very well to the moment, but not to the future.
Right, to be anticipating and preparing for the future and getting ready. Yeah. So in that project, Cynthia mentioned you researched and found CultureTalk. How did you integrate? Maybe tell us a little bit about your process and your approach with the clients. I know I have some numbers. There were a lot of people involved. There were a lot of interviews and focus groups, and, the CultureTalk assessment was a big part of that. Tell us a little bit about your approach and the journey that you went on with the client.
It's interesting. We have to talk about something very tangible, but people think it's intangible. So our cultural evolution journey starts with creating a desired future with C-level.
Okay.
And you have to make them feel, and to live in this future today. So you have to create an experience that they have to pass through some strategic themes that has to be simple, even though they're very delicate. They have to go through step by step, describing the same objectives, the same priorities, the same projects, the same functionalities that this company is going to have in the future. So we have to go deeper into these strategic teams and create the necessary behaviors to support it. And so that's the challenge, because they have to have the same one page, and we give them a reality shock. Imagine they create the future, they feel the future, they are in the future.
They see it.
They say it,
Yeah.
but they have to compare to the reality. And it's
Right.
not so easy because we use culture talk archetypes to make it easier. Because if you talk about something, what do you think about a magician? What do you think about a ruler? What do you think about a sage? So they begin to compare themselves and to understand by insight coming from an individual to understand the company. But you have also to prove. So that's why I think you have to be so accurate. It's a challenge. You have to describe, not by the C-level, by people, the real sentences about their real life. And using that, you can have the brutal gap between. And can you imagine the board? Because the board, sometimes you have the ex-CEO, you have the owner, you have the founder of the company. And sometimes they think their perception is correct. And you're going to compare the perception of C-level, what people say, and what is the diagnosis proving you with real sentences.
Right.
We keep the confidentiality, but you have to be very, very precise. You can be very, very real, because they will have to accept change. And it's not easy to accept.
And you referenced the archetypes. And I think that the archetypes really help that journey, because not only do they have this measurement that shows them, here's where we are today, but they have a language so that they can have a conversation. So that if I tell you what the magician is, then the test tells you, well, you're not a magician yet.
and yeah, I totally agree, Teresa. In one point, your the culture talk approach, showing the light side and the shadow side of each archetype, allows to see something. It's easier for you to see the light. It's not so easy to see the dark side. So when you show the two ways of understanding each archetype, and you sustain with real sentences coming from people saying the real life in the company, they have to accept that. So it's not so easy. There is lots of resistance to the results, because, the first, and I can tell you, in this kind of project with 25,000 people, you take sometimes 6 months to have a very, very deep diagnosis. And you have 6 other months just to validate it, because you have to get through some steps.
And that's so important, that piece.
Wow, so important.
Yes.
And you have to respect the governance of the company, the governance model. You have to pass through the VP, human resources. You have to pass through the CEO, the executive committee, the board, the people community. It's not so easy.
Yeah. Well, and I know that you conducted, as part of your process, multiple focus groups, and that you were talking to people at every level of the company. So I think there were 7 different levels identified, and that you had conversations with the managers at the retail level in the stores, and all the way up the line, that you were bringing people and listening and validating, and as you said, tapping into their real experience, and bringing those words. I love that, the quotes, the actual words of the people. It doesn't get any more clear than that.
And it's easier because at the end you have to engage people, not in the headquarters, but you have to engage people in the shop in Montevideo in Uruguay. So you have to use their words, their feelings, and the way of work. So I think it's something that you were talking about. It's very important. you have to involve not only the C-level, but other levels of the organizations, other level of leaders, because they have to be there co-constructing, co-building, co-writing the narrative. So the storytelling is not oriented to the board, it's oriented to people. So they have to be there as from the beginning, writing with you this narrative, writing with you the key messages, because it's going to be easier after to engage, train, and to convince people and to have a great impact.
And to shift the behaviors, like you mentioned earlier, it's all behaviorally based. I love the way you say that. I love the way that you have to have them writing the story with you, because that feels so tangible. That feels like you're in the shop, in the store. And I know a lot of this transition is also helping the company to transform to the digital age. So there are people involved at every step of that journey, and they are directly impacting the way the customer experiences the organization. I remember some conversations during the process where we were listening for what happens when a customer walks into the store. What is the experience that retail shop person, how are they trained? How are they, what is the experience and the behaviors that are going to support this culture shift? And, just the tangibility of thinking about what does it feel like to walk into a place to buy clothing, down to that level of detail.
Yes, and you have to be so accurate, considering the diagnosis,
right,
the key messages, and the key actions. So that's why I talk about cultural levers. So you have to choose the systems and symbols you have inside the company in day-to-day activities. Exactly see which choice we are doing that are not linked with our purpose, with our culture. So it's a real, as you said, a shift from as is to a to-be company, a to-be behavior. So, and you have to be clear signals and simple signals. So considering how you drive how do you promote people? How do you develop people? How do you allocate your budget? That's our signals that sometimes are telling you about your culture. But if you do not change it, we're not going to change your culture.
Right. Or if you say one thing, but then you do something else, and then the employees, they watch what you do. They pay attention to the behaviors. And that's what Cynthia referenced, the lived experience. How does it feel? And does that line up with what the company says? So tell us how it went. You set out on this transformation journey. You are still involved in it. What happened when you deployed the CultureTalk for Organizations assessment? Give us a little bit of feedback on the experience and the client reaction and the process you'd used.
The first is normally I can tell you 90% of our validation process, you have lots of resistance. It's natural because you're going to see something. Sometimes you are not prepared or you're not waiting for that. It's not so easy to see your real behaviors, even though you try to do it in a different way. The reality is totally different because we cannot control 20,000 people.
Yes. Yeah.
So the second point is very important is the complexity of the validation process, considering the different levels, because if you begin an evolution process of your culture, there is no turning back. Because people are going to trust on you that you want to change. So you have to be very, very committed not only to invest in the actions, but to change leadership models. So coming from your own example, so you are going to change your way of giving feedback, you're going to change your way of managing meetings, you're going to change your way of recognizing values. So it's very tough. It's very real, and we call that process. And I can tell you, Renner is exactly in that moment. You have, the process like that. You have to create the same vision. Based on the vision, you're going to tell a story. You have the same storytelling coming from the leaders. Now you have to have the coherent, consistent, congruent actions and behaviors linked to that.
Right.
So we are really in this tough moment. I always say that it's not the organizations who suffer this change.
Yes.
They want to change our people.
That's right.
So that's this different mindset you have to put in mind in this level company.
Yeah.
You have to behave in a very coherent walk the talk, you have to be coherent with your words and your plans.
Yes. And that's very different for people at an organization who want it to change outside of themselves, but to take ownership and say, how will I change? And starting with the leaders, but that kind of commitment coming into every level of the organization, that each one of us needs to make decisions and choices that are aligned. And that might mean that I need to change. That part takes time to get it down to that level. Reynaldo, do you tell us what archetypes did you measure? And just at a high level, and what were some of the things that you learned from the patterns that showed up in the culture?
Considering the points I can share with you all, because of
Sure.
as a corporate and competitive asset, it's something that is very, very confidential. But what I can tell you is that in the last 10 years that I've been working in transformation, this case, and Renner specifically, is the most real example of culture as a solid competitive asset. It's something that people have proud of it, and they are engaged, they work for the culture. So it was 100%, and there is no difference between areas and brands. They're totally committed to the culture. They're totally engaged. The work that have been done during this almost 20 years or 15 years are so tough, considering culture as a differential asset for the company in the market. Second thing I can share with you is the role of leadership is fundamental to transform and to make successful this change. So they are demanding more autonomy and protagonism. So it's nothing new, considering the real world and in the future. But people want much more autonomy, much more protagonism, and for sure, if you're talking and if you're doing something different, the real talents were going to leave your company. So you have to be much more linked with the talents, making them understand these messages, living, storytelling, story doing, story living. It's very important for these people. And the other thing, and making a link with something that you began to talk about, brand. In Olivia, we are trying to manage brand positioning and culture attributes. It's very important. We have a very new case that it could be possible to use this moment of startup or to launch a new brand, to launch a new culture. And if you use CultureTalk, for example, it's easy to understand because, we work with marketing also, the archetypes are very useful for marketing positioning.
Yes.
So it's very important to consider that new brands and new culture, and you can create your identity. So on that, the archetypes help you to create words, simple repertoire to create your narrative and to make it unique and clear.
And to align it with the authentic experience. I think there's real value in creating a brand story and a brand narrative that is real, not just, a picture of what we think you might want to hear.
That's it. And at the end, your employees will be your best representative of your brand.
Absolutely, because you say what's true, and what you say is what you do.
I remember a case, CultureTalk case, talking about hospitals, a culture of care, a service of care, taking care of somebody is something that you have to have not only in your brand, but in your service. So I think it's an opportunity to link that.
Yes, to bring those things together. Awesome. Cynthia, I know you're still here, and I know we have some folks live listening. Do we have any questions for Reynaldo regarding the story he's been sharing?
Well, it's an awesome story, and we don't have any questions that have come in, but I do see people liking and commenting on some of the things. And I would say, going back to maybe the beginning, Reynaldo, I love the way you described your process at Olivia in terms of really getting the leadership team to feel the future. I haven't heard that expression, but for me, there was a real lean in, like, what does it mean to feel a future? And then you went on and said, it's kind of, sometimes it can be a reality shock, like looking at, like, going from feeling the future to then experiencing what actually is present. So I thought that was really interesting. We do have one question right now, and it's coming from Christian Philly, who Reynaldo, who was part of the project earlier on. And he said one topic. He says one topic he finds intriguing is how company leaders retain their own authenticity, so who they are, once they realize they need to begin enacting a new storyline.
It's interesting because you have to keep your own way of expressing your history. But when you have, for sure, you do not have in a executive committee, you have different people that come from the company or come from the market. So you have to mix their experiences. So the way of expressing the history is totally different. But is it possible? Is it possible? And we have a very interesting way of describing it, because I make an experience telling about the history of a trip I did to Bariloche. And I make them to close their eyes and to feel what I'm telling about, feeling flavors, temperature, and sounds. And I think it's possible to create that. A leader is a storyteller. It's something that we, inclusive, we are forming, training people to tell stories.
Wow.
Because it's interesting. People connect to real stories, vivid stories. So it's a skill that they have to develop. In considering that we are going to work in an hybrid way, using Zoom, LinkedIn, presential activities, you have to manage that. And the leaders are totally nude because they have to reinvent themselves. So I think it's possible. You have to look for a very special personal history to make it real to your employee, to your team.
Yeah.
I love that point too, because I think we so often tell leaders to tell stories, and yet we don't offer them that kind of how, right? And the archetypes really loan themselves to that too, like, who am I and how do I tell that story so that you really get to know me in an authentic way? I would close out with a couple of things. One, you really brought out like the courage and the commitment that it takes to do a cultural transformation. I know this is a multi-year endeavor that you're sharing with us. I think you said there's no turning back.
I liked that part. There's no turning back. Yeah.
There's no turning back on that. So I really am appreciating that courage and commitment. I would love, Reynaldo, for you to tell people where we can learn more about Olivia if they are, some of our listeners now or later are interested in working with you and Olivia. They can connect with you on LinkedIn, and we can drop Olivia's website.
Yes. You can share our website. It's Olivia .global, global.com.br there, and you can also send them my LinkedIn address, and then we can be available to share any other information that could be possible and interesting for you.
Perfect. We appreciate that. And for anyone that's interested in going through the training that Reynaldo and a couple members of his team came through in order to bring the CultureTalk archetype assessment system into kind of that global, into the cultural transformation conversation. We do have a certification class that starts next week. So feel free.
There's no time like the present, right?
Exactly. If you've been inspired, we start on May 2nd, and we'll also drop, Isabel, if you could drop into the comments as well, a link to the CultureTalk certification program. So a million thanks from us here, Reynaldo, how much we appreciate you and Guido and other folks at Olivia really embracing, and we're learning so much from you. We learned obviously to translate we were only nascent in Portuguese, and Teresa really handled that translation project.
That's right.
But we learned some Portuguese along the way too.
No problems. I shared my email and Olivia's site address for you all. It's a pleasure. A cultural transformation process is not a short period process. You have to consider between 2 and 4 or 5 years to change the culture, driving to the new future. It's not so easy. You have to invest in people, and you have to trust on people to represent your culture. So you have to engage them, to convince them, and to make them think that they are able to create this future. So it's a pleasure. Culture is not something that you can replicate. I like Apple's and Google's culture.
Yes.
Okay, it's not your people, not your market, it's not your history, it's not your purpose. It has to be your own culture, and for that you have to prepare leaders to represent it. So it's a very, I can share that I like and I'm passionate about this, and for sure CultureTalk helped me to make it easier, clearer, and relevant for my customers.
What a great,
Awesome.
great way to close.
Yeah, thank you. And we'd be so excited to catch up with you again in a few months or so to see how things are changing and where the journey has taken you. So,
Okay,
awesome.
thank you.
Thanks so much, Reynaldo.
I know.